When I was 16, my dad rented a small cabin deep in the woods of West Virginia during winter break. The place was extremely isolated. The nearest town was over 40 minutes away, and the cabin itself sat surrounded by dense forest on all sides. There was no internet, barely any phone signal, and the only heat source was an old wood stove. The first night was fine. Snow covered everything outside, making the woods look strangely quiet. But on the second night, around 1 a.m., I woke up because I heard something walking outside the cabin. At first I assumed it was an animal. The footsteps sounded heavy but uneven, crunching through snow slowly around the house. Then I realized something disturbing. Whatever it was sounded bipedal, 2 distinct footsteps at a time. I sat up in bed, listening while the footsteps circled the cabin. My dad was asleep in the next room, so I tried convincing myself it was probably another person hiking nearby. But who hikes isolated woods in the middle of the night during winter? Then came the knock. 3 slow knocks against the wall beside my bed. I completely froze. A few seconds later, another 3 knocks came from the kitchen side of the cabin. Then, silence. I finally got enough courage to wake my dad. He immediately grabbed a flashlight and looked out the front window, but there was nothing there. He told me it was probably tree branches or ice shifting, but I could tell from his face he didn't believe that himself.
About 10 minutes later, we both heard footsteps again, this time directly on the porch. The porch wrapped around part of the cabin, so whatever was outside slowly walked from one side to the other. We could hear every creak of the wooden boards. Then the footsteps stopped directly outside the living room window. My dad turned off the lantern near us, so whoever was outside couldn't see in clearly. We sat in darkness, listening. That's when something tapped lightly against the glass. Not a branch, fingernails. My dad suddenly stood up and shouted that he had a gun and was calling the police. The tapping stopped instantly. We waited there silently for almost a minute before hearing footsteps quickly move off the porch into the woods. Neither of us slept afterward. The next morning, my dad went outside to check around the cabin. I remember hearing him yell for me in a voice I'd never heard before, panicked. There were footprints in the snow surrounding the cabin, bare human footprints. The tracks circled the entire place multiple times and stopped right outside my bedroom window. My dad followed them toward the woods, but after about 20 feet, they abruptly disappeared. No return tracks, nothing. We packed up and left early that morning. On the drive home, my dad admitted he saw something outside the living room window during the tapping. He said he only caught it for a second because it ducked away quickly, but it looked like someone standing unusually close to the glass with their head tilted sideways. What scares me most is something I noticed years later while looking through old photos from that trip. In one picture taken the day before everything happened, you can see the cabin in the background. And standing between the trees behind it is a person wearing dark clothes, partially hidden, staring directly at whoever took the photo.
A few years ago, my cousin and I decided to hike an abandoned fire tower trail in Oregon. The trail had been shut down officially after storm damage, but people still explored it anyway. Online photos made the place look creepy in a cool way, so we figured it would be fun. The hike itself took almost 3 hours because the trail was overgrown and difficult to follow. By the time we reached the fire tower, the sun was already starting to set. The tower looked ancient. Rust covered almost everything, and the stairs creaked violently when we climbed them. From the top, you could see miles of forest in every direction. No roads, no buildings, nothing. It honestly felt like standing in the middle of nowhere. We stayed up there taking photos until it got dark enough that we realized we needed to head back immediately. About 20 minutes into the hike down, we heard what sounded like metal clanging somewhere behind us. At first I thought it was the tower shifting in the wind, But then it happened again. Clang, clang, clang. Like someone hitting metal stairs while walking down them. My cousin joked that maybe another hiker was coming down after us, but the sound kept repeating at a steady pace long after it should have stopped. Then we noticed something worse. Every time we stopped walking, the clanging stopped too. That immediately put us on edge. We started moving faster, and for a while the sound completely disappeared completely. We relaxed a little until my cousin suddenly grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. He pointed off the trail to our left. Maybe 30 feet into the woods, partially hidden behind trees, was a person standing completely still.
I only saw them for maybe 2 seconds in the flashlight beam, but I remember enough to wish I hadn't. It looked like an older man wearing a dark coat, except his face looked pale to the point it almost reflected the light. He wasn't blinking, he wasn't reacting, just standing there watching us. We both immediately started speed walking downhill without saying a word. A minute later, we heard footsteps crashing through the woods beside us. Not behind us, beside us, matching our pace. Whoever it was stayed just out of sight in the trees. Every now and then we'd catch glimpses of movement with our flashlights. Then we heard laughing. Not loud, crazy laughter. Quiet laughing. Like someone trying not to laugh out loud. At that point, we completely panicked and started running. The trail was uneven and dangerous in the dark, but neither of us cared. The footsteps in the woods got faster too. I remember hearing branches snapping incredibly close to us. We finally reached the parking lot around 11 p.m., completely out of breath. There was only one other vehicle there besides ours, an old pickup truck parked crooked near the tree line. The driver's side door was open. We jumped into my car and locked the doors immediately. Right as I started the engine, my cousin looked toward the woods and quietly said, "Don't look." Of course I looked. Standing near the edge of the parking lot was the same pale-faced man from the trail, perfectly still, watching us. Even from that distance, I could tell he was smiling. I drove out of there faster than I ever have in my life. The weirdest part is that when we checked online later, we found old forum posts from hikers mentioning a man who supposedly lived somewhere in those woods and followed people after dark. Most people brushed it off as an urban legend. I don't think it was.
When I was 19, 3 friends and I drove out to a wooded area in northern Pennsylvania for a weekend camping trip. It was one of those places with no signal, no nearby roads, and barely any marked trails. We set up camp just before dark near a dried-up creek bed. At first, everything felt normal. We made food, joked around, and stayed up by the fire telling creepy stories. Around midnight, my friend Tyler suddenly stopped talking and stared into the woods behind me. I turned around, expecting a deer or something, but there was nothing there. Then I heard it too. Whistling. It sounded like someone trying to casually whistle a tune, except it was completely off-key and slow. It came from deep in the trees. At first, we assumed it was another camper messing with us. Tyler yelled out asking if someone was there, but the whistling stopped immediately. The silence afterward felt wrong. No insects, no wind, nothing. About 10 seconds later, the whistling started again, except now it sounded closer, way closer. My friend Aaron grabbed a flashlight and shined it into the woods, but the beam only hit rows of trees and darkness. The sound kept moving around us, like whoever was making it was circling the campsite. None of us were laughing anymore.
We decided to ignore it and head into our tents, hoping it was just some idiot trying to scare people. I shared a tent with Tyler, and maybe 15 minutes after lying down, I heard slow footsteps crunching through leaves outside. They stopped right beside our tent. Tyler whispered, "Don't move." I could hear breathing outside. Not heavy breathing, just calm breathing, like someone standing there, listening to us.
Then came 3 slow scratches against the side of the tent. I genuinely thought we were about to get attacked. Tyler quietly reached for the knife he kept in his backpack while I grabbed the flashlight. We sat there frozen for almost a full minute before the footsteps slowly walked away. Neither of us slept that night. At around 5 a.m., when the sky started getting lighter, Aaron came running over from his tent looking pale. He told us someone had been outside his tent whispering during the night. He couldn't make out the words, but he heard them moving around for hours. The creepiest part happened before we left. While packing up camp, Tyler found muddy footprints behind our tents. Bare footprints. Human. They circled the entire campsite and stopped only a few feet from where we slept. But what messed me up was the size. The prints looked unnaturally long and narrow, almost stretched out, and they led into the woods, but never back out. We left immediately. About an hour into the drive home, Tyler admitted something he hadn't told us earlier. During the scratching on the tent, he looked toward the lower corner near the zipper and saw a shadow blocking the moonlight outside. Whoever it was had been crouching down, staring directly into the tent. He said he could barely make out one eye through the fabric, wide open and unmoving. I still camp occasionally, but never in isolated woods anymore. And anytime I hear someone whistle at night, even casually, my stomach drops instantly.